Hello, today I'm making hamburger buns and I wanted to share this recipe with you because it's one of our favorites and one that I make on a regular basis. So the first thing that I am going to do is proof the yeast, and this is done by mixing dry active yeast and flour to warm water, mixing it really well and letting it sit aside to activate. And while that's activating, I beat up an egg because once it's activated, I'm going to go ahead and add the egg to that mixture. That's nice and activated. So now I'll go ahead and add that egg that I just beat, as well as 3 tablespoons of melted butter, 3 tablespoons of sugar, and 1¼ teaspoon of salt, and mix that up really nicely. Basically, this is going to be the wet ingredients that I'll be adding to the dry in just a few minutes. Okay, that's nice and stirred. So next I'm going to move over to the mixer, and you can actually do this by hand too, but I do find that it's a little bit quicker to do in the mixer. With the dough hook on, I'll add 3 cups of bread flour. I like to use bread flour for this. It has a higher protein content, so it gives makes for a stronger dough and gives a better end result. At least in my experience. So I'm going to add the wet into the dry and just let it incorporate in. And what'll happen is it'll start to be this kind of loose mixture as everything slowly comes together. And then once that happens, you'll be able to see it just go from this loose mix to a little bit tighter of a mixture to a nice dough ball. And once it starts pulling away from the sides of the bowl, then you know that it's done. It's almost like once it cleans the bowl for you, then you know you're ready to take it out. So after that, I moved to a floured surface, and I have done this before, forgetting to flour my surface, and it did not end well. So flour the surface and pour out the dough. I do usually knead this by hand just a little bit to make it come together. This isn't necessary. I've seen plenty of people who do this without hand kneading, but it's just something that I do. It's, I guess, just my habit, but it makes the dough come together just a little bit better, getting ready for the first rise. Now that that is in a nice little ball, I am very generous with oiling my bowl. I always use olive oil. I've never used anything else. That's just my method. And then I take the dough ball and I coat it very well, cover it with plastic wrap, and then set it aside in a nice place. My choice is above the microwave. I'm going to let this rise for 2 hours, but I will say on the day that I filmed this, I took it out a little sooner than I had planned just because I got my times messed up, and it still turned out fine, thank goodness. Anyways, once it comes out, I do shape it a little bit into a ball again, and then cut it into how many buns I'm going to want. So for this batch, I'm going to make 8 buns, but I've done this before making 10. Just kind of depends on how big I want the end result to be. And I do typically have a scale by me. I'm not trying to win any awards for uniform bakes, but I do like them to be generally the same size, or at least close to the same size. So I do like to weigh mine. And then once I have them divided how I want them to be, then I really just shape them into little balls. I definitely am sure that other people have a much better technique, but this technique works for me. Really, I just shape them and form them into little tiny bread loaves, and make sure that the seams are all kind of pressed in through the bottom, and do that for all of the buns that I'm gonna have. Like I said before, I'm not going for perfection. I am just going to make these in these little dough balls and get them ready for the oven. So if they're not perfect, I don't stress out about it. I just move on to the next one. And then after I get them formed in these little balls, I just press them into kind of little flat saucers and cover them with saran wrap and let them rise for another hour. When it's almost been an hour, I preheat my oven to 375 degrees and then I get a basic egg wash ready. This is just an egg with a little bit of milk and mix that up nicely. And I do like to use an egg wash when or before I bake these. It gives a really pretty end result. This isn't necessary though. They're going to taste just as good if they don't have the egg wash on. It's just something that I like to do. Another benefit though of using of putting the egg wash on is if you're going to top it with anything, the topping does stick better. And I like to top mine with sesame seeds. So I always try to keep some on hand and just put a little sprinkling on the buns after I get the egg wash on. And once I have that done, I'm going to pop it in the oven for 16-ish minutes. And look at what we have here. Aren't they so beautiful? I love fresh baked bread, especially homemade. It's the best. These are so good as for sandwiches, for egg salad, for really anything. They don't last long in this house at all, but they're so pretty. So hopefully you give them a try. Thanks for watching.